I'm standing here with Mr. David Carr, who I would consider an expert on the skiing in Allegany State Park, and this is the 50mm ski jump here that you can approach from, I believe, Red Jacket Trail. Is that correct, sir?
I don't know the name of the trail, but from the administration building, there used to be a trail that would come over and you could stand on the top of the jumps.
Very good, yes. And anyways, we're here at the 50mm. We just concluded a conversation over by the 30mm. And once again, these ski jumps would have a bridge going across the lower Red House Brook behind us in the bushes here. Now they've built a modern bridge after one was washed away many moons ago when I was fairly a kid. But please continue, sir.
Talking about going across the bridge, occasionally somebody didn't go across the bridge and they slid into the creek. Not so much on this one, but more on the 30-meter. But this was a fine jump. And we would have a winter carnival, and skiers would come from Syracuse University, Dartmouth, Paul Smith, West Point. I can't remember all the names. They would come down here, and people who had kids skiing or people skiing, and they'd take them in, and it didn't cost them anything to come down, and they would invite us back to their winter carnival, which was very enjoyable. But of all of them, this still was the finest 50-meter ski jump. Most of them were 30 or 40, but there were any of the colleges had a 50-meter jump, and really had a great time during those periods. It was myself, Don Fuller, Darwin Boyer, Jack Schultz, Jim Mendel. We were the ones that went to the different college carnivals. And Jack Schultz eventually became a judge at the 70-meter jumps in Lake Placid, and he traveled around the country as a judge.
You mentioned Boyer. They named the Boyer Bridge over there they just put in. Was that the namesake for that, do you recall?
Yes, because Lawrence and Alice Boyer lived in the house right next to that, and they had Darwin Boyer, who was a friend of mine, and he lives in Florida now, and a daughter, Georgianne, who's passed away, and the bridge across the stream, Red House Creek, we used to go down and ski. There was a big hole there, and we'd swim in it and jump off the railing, see who could jump the farthest. But that rotted away, and they've installed a new one because there's a nice hiking path or a four-wheeler path that goes up into the woods behind where their house was. And the Fullers lived next door. That's where Don Fuller lived. And Jim Mendel lived here in a row of houses on the north side of the service road. And Ted and Terry LaCroix lived in the last house on the right of the service road. Their dad worked in the park. So.
Very good. Now, this service road was obviously full of houses at one time, as you had mentioned. Yeah. It also used to cut right through to ASP2. And
yes, it did.
Okay. Yeah. And did the bridge wash out there, or they just terminated so traffic wouldn't go that way?
They just terminated it so traffic wouldn't be on it, that's all.
Okay, very good, because you can see, where it once continued on. Now, are you familiar with the history of that log cabin down there? Was that an old CCC structure?
Yes, it is. And an officer for the CC camp lived there. I cannot remember what his name was, but I was about 5 or 6 years old when that was there. And I used to go down, and they never had any children, but his wife would bring me in and she'd give me cookies and cocoa or candy, and I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. They had a nice little dog I used to play with. But when the CC camp closed up, they moved out. And I'm very surprised the park hasn't torn it down, because they've torn down everything else there and rebuilt. Just before you get there, there was an ice house, and the ice was harvested out of Red House Lake, and stored in the ice house. And then they packed sawdust around it so it would last through the summer. So anybody that lived in that area, there weren't any refrigerators, they're all ice boxes. They'd go down and get a hunk of ice and bring it back and put it in their ice box.
Very good. I believe they did that on Quaker too, harvested ice on Science Lake, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they did.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, we're gonna conclude this clip and then move down the path here a little bit more. Thank you very much, Mr. Carr.